I'm going to talk to you today about analyzing benchmark data and doing different data meetings with your teachers after you guys do interim benchmarks. We analyze data in benchmarks because we want to have the most targeted reteaching that we can after we teach. And a good question to begin your benchmark data meetings with is, if there's teaching going on, but the students aren't really learning, is it really teaching? And even though our teachers try their very best before benchmarks and before any of your assessments, students don't master everything that they need to. Therefore, reteaching needs to happen. When we begin analyzing data with teachers, it's a lot of information, and they go through various stages of how they're feeling. So a really good slide to begin with also is to explain to teachers what they may be feeling and what they're going to go through here. So the first thing is challenging the test. If it's hard, teachers may say that different questions are too difficult, it's not how they taught it, different things, but they need to get past this first. Secondly, they may feel inadequate or distrustful. Third, then they usually move to ignorance, confusion, or overload. There's a lot of data that comes from this, and sometimes it's really overwhelming. Next, they may be analytical but superficial, saying, my kids don't read well, it's getting there, but it's not really going to help us. Then we can look for causes of why that may be happening. And finally, we get to changing teaching practices and improving student learning, which really gets us to different results. If we keep teaching the same way that we always have, nothing's going to happen. So we need to get to changing how we're teaching. And that's the purpose of our data meetings. So first, we're going to go into analyzing some data. We start with a high level of data analysis because we do want to look at overall trends, but that's not what our focus is going to be. First, you're going to analyze the overall general trends of your data. You're going to look for both positives and negatives in student performance. If this happens, and we want to make sure that it's we're looking at all of everything that's happening. So we first start with our big level of data, and we look at both positives and negatives. So here we just have a screenshot from Kickboard, one of the data systems we use, and I circled two different things. One of them is a positive thing. Students did pretty well, 76%. You can see down here that how individual students actually did varies. Here's another standard that students only got an average of 56% correct, and that's something we want to focus on as a negative. We fill out this data takeaways chart to, as teachers are doing that, really solidify their data. So using this chart, you name the top 2 to 3 positive trends and the top 2 to 3 things that you want to look at more because your kids didn't do very well. From that, you choose one priority standard. It's impossible to reteach everything that you need to, so you really want to focus on one standard so you can really get into reteaching that. After you focus on that standard, we then want to reread the standard and identify the items or questions that are used to assess that, which is what we write right here. So questions number 2, 6, and 8 were the questions, we write that in. And then we determine what part of the standard the item assesses. And we write that in there. Lastly, we identify the student misunderstandings. There's a specific part of an objective. There are different things that happen with each of the incorrect answer choices that will tell us a lot about what students were thinking. And then finally, we also want to know which students missed it. It probably won't be every single student in the class, and sometimes you may want to remediate for a small group. We need to understand, is it a general group of students who are misunderstanding, or is it just a small group? Here's an example of doing this data takeaway. First, you reread the standard. This is a standard from Ratios and Proportions from 6th grade. Then we identify the items or questions used for that standard. So in this standard, it was items 2, 14, and 25. So we go back and we look at just those questions. After that, we look at every single question to determine which part of the standard is assessed. So in this question, it asks about the ratio of blue to red marbles. It uses ratio language, and then students express it as a numerical relationship between two real quantities. We also noted what percentage of students got this correct. We did the same thing for item number 14 and item number 25. Again, how many students got these questions correct were different, which is why we really want to be looking at what part of the standard, because the students didn't miss the entire standard. From there, we identify the student misunderstanding. we chose to look at number 2. We want to think about what do students actually need to do to solve the problem, and why students were choosing incorrect answers. That really gets us into where the student misunderstanding is happening so that we're not trying to reteach everything in this standard. So we look at answer choice A is not correct, and this is what students did incorrectly. Answer choice B and answer choice C are both incorrect, and this is what they did. And finally, we noted which students chose these wrong answers, so we know what students were thinking and which students they were. So this is everything put together in our data takeaways chart. It's a lot of information, but it's the first step of really analyzing and being able to do targeted reteaching for after benchmarks that will really result in increased student achievement. After we complete that, we actually want to make a data action plan. It's great knowing what students didn't understand, which students didn't understand it, but what is actually going to change? Therefore, we get to our action plan. This is a really big document, but it's just your plan for what you're going to do in class. It's in addition to your lessons that you're already doing, and it doesn't take the place of anything. In this plan, you're going to write the standard from your data takeaway chart that you already did. Is that correct? And then you always want to make a goal for what you want your students to do. You're putting in your sub-skill and what do you hope your students to master in this. And then who are you teaching? Is it going to be your entire group? Is it going to be a small group of 5 students? Is it going to be a pull-out group of about 10? It's going to be one individual student. You need to know who you're targeting because it may not always be the entire class. And then really important part in reteaching is that how did you teach this originally? Because assuming you taught it before the benchmark. And then what are you going to do new? And then what are you going to do continue? It doesn't do us any good to reteach things the exact same way that we taught them the first time, though we meant the very best in doing so. Our students didn't master it. So let's think of a new way to teach this so they can get it. And also, how are we going to reinforce it through continued practice ongoing? Next, you want to think of when this reteaching is actually going to happen. You knew it didn't go well, and now you need to reteach from it. So when are you going to be doing this? Next, how are you going to hook your kids in? You've already taught this. They think they probably have already seen this, but they obviously didn't master it. What are you going to do to get them excited about it and then let them know that you have a goal in what you're getting toward? Secondly, how are you going to model this? You're going to be using a new strategy. They're going to learn a new way of doing this. So how are you going to explain how they actually get to do? Then plan for guided practice and when that's going to happen, exactly what you're doing, saying, and having students do. And then you're also going to be planning for when students are going to practice, because they need time to go through this information, so you can also help them in small groups. This is the plan for data reteaching, and hopefully by the end of it, your students will have mastered this very specific objective, and student test scores will have gone up.